Developing and maintaining good study techniques. You by now would have come up with a nice technique to study. However, the key, as with any practice, is to maintain your good study techniques. Research shows that students remember 90% of the information that they teach others, 75% of what they practice by doing. However, the most popular study strategies, reading, highlighting, and listening to lectures, are very low yield in terms of retention. We only remember 10% of what we read and 5% of what we hear in a lecture. This presentation will guide you through developing and maintaining a good study technique which yields results. When coming up with your routine of study, you need to make some decisions. These decisions are important because you want to maintain your study routine all year long. The main decisions you need to make are where you will study, when you will study, what you will study, how you will study, why you are studying, and, importantly, who can help you. The first thing to clarify is the difference between studying and completing homework. Many of my students believe that spending hours on completing homework is studying, but that is not the case. Homework is important, of course, but it's only a preliminary step to actually studying. Homework includes completing activities set by the teacher, completing classwork not finished in class, which hopefully you don't have a lot of, and completing practice exams when you are ready. The problem with this is that revision requires something different. Revision requires you to rework the content in an active way consistently over extended periods of time. Examples of studying include explaining the concept that you learnt in class today to a friend, writing your own questions based upon course content, completing practice exams, not when you are ready, but from the very beginning of the year, going through your answers, going through the feedback provided by the teacher and friends, and even something such as going through past exams just to check out what kinds of questions have been asked in the past and therefore might be asked again. These active revision techniques require you to rework the content presented in class and during homework in a different way, leading to powerful long-term memory of the content and skills that you're expected to master. When deciding where to study, there are a number of options students have. The most popular is to create your own study nest, which you identify and claim as your own. This is the place where, when you go, you just study and do nothing else. You need to make sure that you reduce your cognitive load. Many people believe that multitasking is possible, but psychologists and neurologists have proven, beyond doubt, that actually human beings are terrible at multitasking. All that we end up doing is completing two tasks fairly badly. It's important that you reduce your cognitive load by getting rid of distractions in your study zone. Yes, music is one of those distractions. Because short-term memory only has a limited storage capacity, any music will simply interfere with your retention of content. To reduce cognitive load, you need to reduce the amount of stimulation going to your brain. Facebook, TV, all of these also add to cognitive load, making it harder for you to retain content and study effectively. You need to make sure your study nest is comfortable with sufficient lighting and fresh air. It needs to have all of the resources you need, and you'll need to establish times when you study, which I'll come to in a minute. Some people can't create a study nest at home. It might be that lots of people live in your house, or that you get drawn into all sorts of chores and babysitting at times when you need to study. If that's the case, look elsewhere for your study nest. It could be that you ask a teacher for help and they open up a room for you after school to study for an hour or so. You could also head to your local library or your school library to study. As well as creating study nests, it is important to identify study-free zones at your house. These are areas where you don't study. A popular one includes the bedroom, where you just go to sleep and to relax, or the living room, where you go to meet with family or to watch television, but you don't attempt to study there. If you develop a good routine, your brain will soon click into action as soon as you are in your study nest. Timing is also very important to think about. Sometimes students tell me that they will come home with a whole list of tasks every single day, and they then spend 4 hours or more sometimes just getting through those tasks. Those tasks include homework, but they don't include studying. What you need to figure out is how your brain operates best. Brain function times are very unique, and you need to figure out when your peak brain time is. For some people, this can be very early in the morning, so it might actually be more productive to wake up 40 minutes earlier, complete some work, rather than spending 2 hours after school when you are already tired trying to complete this work. Research also shows that it is important to consider for how long you study. We all know that cramming doesn't work. It doesn't lead to long-term retention of content. Usually, psychologists talk about a 45 to 15 rule. This means 45 minutes of studying and then 15-minute rest periods. You can complete more than one of these, for example, 45-15, 45-15, but it is important to have a break so that your brain can consolidate the information that it has just learned. To consolidate this information requires repetition. You are better off studying for 45 minutes, having a break, and then for another 45 minutes, having a go at answering questions related to the content that you've just studied. That is a lot more productive than 3 hours of solid sitting there, highlighting and rewriting things. The good news is that the brain is very good at chunking information, which is in working memory. Chunking is important because, as most research has shown, around 7 items can be held in working memory at any given time. It takes around 20 hours to acquire and to master a new skill. So if you follow the 45-15 rule, you can do several short burst study sessions which lead to more effective outcomes. The next decision you need to make is how you will study, and this, like timing, is fairly individual. Lots of people learn in different ways, but as you know, by the time you reach VCE, mostly you are bound to particular output formats. For instance, if the teacher says essay, that's what you need to produce. But if you Google VAC techniques for revision, these will help you to figure out ways that you input information, namely how you learn things, not what you produce. VAC can be Googled, and there are lots of free online quizzes available. They will help you to determine whether you're a visual, auditory or kinesthetic learner and the types of studying that will be beneficial for you. It is very important that you embed into your study practice examples or exams early and frequently. Do not wait until you are ready. If you're lucky enough, your teacher might already be making some quiz stars or various other quizzes for you to regularly complete. Don't wait until you are ready. Have a go at questions now. If you are doing lots of reading but aren't finding that you're remembering much of the info, the 3R strategy could help you. Read, recall, and read. Remember, you will learn 90% of what you try to teach others properly. Read a chunk of text, put it down, pretend to explain it to somebody else, and then reread the information, a much more effective way. If you're having trouble with tricky vocabulary, it is interesting if you put that vocabulary into non-linguistic representations, often you'll remember those words better. You need to also ensure that you act on teacher feedback. A very powerful study technique is to take an assignment that your teacher has returned and to rewrite it based on the teacher feedback and resubmit it again. You might want to do this even more than once, if possible. It is important that you take notes effectively in class so that you don't devote hours at the end trying to rewrite notes, another low-yield strategy they won't help you memorise very much. Know your brain is the key message here. Learning involves not just what you are looking at directly, but peripheral perception too. Particularly if you are a visual learner, you might display posters in your room to help you remember key events, key words and key processes. A big decision to make is what to study. Given most VCE students' diaries, the amount of work that you are probably expected to get in years 11 and 12 might at first seem overwhelming. It is important for you to organise what information you need to know in a logical order so that you do not become overwhelmed. One trick that I suggest to my students is to complete a capacity matrix, also known as a content matrix. An example of it is on the slide in front of you right now. The idea here is to break down each dot point of the study design into manageable chunks, small bits of information. You then reflect on how well you've understood each piece of information. So for the first one, employability skills, if I understood the content really, really well and don't need to really go through this content again, I would tick the happy face. If I was not 100% sure and would need to come back a week or so before the exam to the content, I would tick the meh face. If I never even heard of this concept and I had absolutely no idea where to start, I would tick the sad face. To feel comfortable, probably, most students, when they revise for a test, will start with content they know fairly well. It is important that you don't do that. Start with the content you're not familiar with and work your way backwards from there. If your teacher hasn't provided a checklist, turn VCAA dot points into a checklist yourself. And lastly, think about who can help you. Building a support network is very important. Study groups can help, but only if the people in your study group are as committed to studying as you are. Social media can help, and you can exchange practice exam questions and feedback with other kids. Do not ever wait to ask the teacher. Be active in seeking answers to questions yourself. That question sitting in front of you uncompleted could be easily Googled. You can also seek the help of different subject organisations, like HTAV, or others. And remind yourself always why you are studying. You're studying to stay on track. You're studying to avoid cramming at the end. And you are studying because you are passionate about your education and want to do well as you can do. John Hattie, a very famous researcher, suggested that self-reported grades are among the most important predictors of student success. That's right. How well you think you will go actually ends up impacting on your grade the most. So, believe that you can do it. All the very best.